The ACC schedule is out, and it almost looks like they don't want Miami in the playoff.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. And this episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. The ACC schedule gives me so many thoughts. I might just air them over the course of the next 8 months until we have a football game. We're under 8 months until Week 0 games begin. My guy Kenton Gibbs of Locked On ACC is here with me today. I'm sure he knows that, and I want to dive straight into this, Kenton, because Miami is a brand that I'm sure the ACC would love to have be a perennial power. Whether they would, favor the schedule this way or not, or concoct it in a way that gives them the benefit. Yeah, well, they're clearly not doing that because of the teams in the ACC that we expect to be playoff and conference title contenders next year, and the odds reflect that as well, Kenton. I don't think anyone's got it tougher than Miami. 2 byes in a 3-week span, followed by 7 straight games. The final 2 are on the road. This is a legitimate problem for Miami to try to make the playoff.
And you want to know the craziest part about it? Spencer, you didn't even mention the fact that the national runner-up is game 1 out of the gates. And I thought to myself, well, this should bode well for Miami because Notre Dame's going to be breaking in a new quarterback, and, it's best to get him early. And then I thought about it. I said, Ken, what the hell are you talking about? Miami's breaking in a new quarterback too. The only difference is they're breaking in a new quarterback, new wide receiver 1, new tight end 1. I mean, it's going to be tough. New RB 1 as well, I believe. And don't get me wrong, Fletcher's been in that program for some time. But, Damian Martinez was a hell of a back in his own right. So, this is like the anti-Jim Harbaugh moment. Who's got it worse than them? Nobody. Because you look at that, and then like you just mentioned, the bye week situation, right? You look at this and you say, okay, you play Bama. Then you get Bethune to maybe rest up and get guys right. Then you got South Florida. Then you got Florida. And then you got a bye week, right? Going right before Florida State, you get a bye week. Hey, we love that. We love a bye week before your biggest game of this, or one of the biggest rivalries that you're going to play all season. And then you get another bye week immediately following that. What? I'm legitimately confused. I'm looking at this schedule legitimately perplexed. Like, why are their bye weeks so close? For what reason would you even do that? It's just very, again, and here's the thing. I'm not high on Carson Beck at all. I have been very vocal about that. I'm not a Carson Beck believer at all. I think he maybe raises your floor. I don't believe there's a world where he raises your ceiling unless you put elite weapons around him. But with that being said, again, this schedule just does them even more of a disservice to where I will say this on the back end. Because we all thought we knew who everybody was last year, and we do this every year with college football, where we assume that 18 and 22-year-olds will be the same as they were last year. And Spencer, you and I aren't that far removed from being 18 and 22. 19-year-old and 20 is a different guy. It's a different guy. If Miami can run the table, if they can do good things, hell, if they can start 6-0, and I mean that, 6-0 with this schedule, my hat goes off to them. And I think that they deserve every bit of playoff contention that they have earned at that point.
I completely agree. A non-conference slate that includes not 1 but 2 Power 4 opponents, and those 2 opponents are Notre Dame and Florida. Yeah. Now, the good news, you get both of them at home. So I like Miami's chances to win one of those games. Notre Dame, according to our friends at FanDuel, is a 2.5-point favorite. We don't know about the Florida situation, but the Gators are going to be solid. I talked about them on yesterday's show. I don't know if they're going to be great, but they're not going to be bad. And now, Miami didn't have a problem with them in the swamp last year, but that was also with Cam Ward. I want to go back to the bye situation, Kenton, because this is an anti-SEC move by the ACC, because what has always been obvious over the years has been the SEC has known how to work their schedules better than everybody else. They have done that incredibly well. I don't fault them for doing it. The flawed structure of college football has allowed them to do that. But you have a premier brand, a coach going into his 4th year who has recruited exceptionally well, your team that is second in the preseason conference championship odds, and you essentially nullify the importance of their second bye. And then you give them 7 straight games, and the final 2 are on the road. And oh, by the way, those games are at Virginia Tech and at Pitt. Those are not cakewalks. That's not playing, a Stanford or somebody like that who's been at the bottom of the conference. Those are solid, respectable teams that you can see them losing. And Miami this year didn't have this scheduling unfortunate situation and lost the last game of the regular season at Syracuse. And to think it's ridiculous that either Virginia Tech or Pitt could be in that 8, 9, 10 win range next year, I don't think that's completely insane. So you have now taken one of your biggest brands in the ACC and you have made the path to the playoff as difficult as you could have possibly constructed. I really don't get why they're doing this to Miami.
You and me both. And the words of the great Neil Sedaka, winning on the road is hard to do. I'm joking. He made the song Breaking Up is hard to do, but that's neither here nor there. The reality of this schedule for Miami is this, right? They're going to have to produce depth that they may not actually have. Because when you think about that back half of that schedule, 7 games straight. And like you said, this isn't Stanford. This isn't, a cakewalk that they're closing out the season with. Hell, even Stanford last year upset a few teams down the stretch. Got a win at Louisville somehow, the same Louisville to beat Clemson. So you're looking at a situation where even if you believe, Pitt's a cakewalk, because that's really the Steelers state.
They're not, by the way. Happening.
They're not. But even if we pretended, this is still a Power 4 team. 2 Power 4 teams that you're closing the year out with on the road. That is incredibly tough, man. That's incredibly difficult. And my question about how this came to be would be like, nobody looked at this schedule and said, nah, we kind of got to scrap this. And I get it. You don't want to scrap everybody's schedule for one team. But did nobody say, is there any way that we could potentially rework this?
Yeah.
Without, it being deleterious to everybody else? Because this, to me, feels like it puts a very direct handicap on what, Miami have planned for this year.
By the way, we have not even mentioned 2 of their toughest games this season. We don't know if Florida State's going to bounce back, but they have to play them on the road, sandwiched in between those 2 byes. That's not what I'm talking about. They have to play Louisville at home. Insane home slate for Miami fans to go and watch for the Hurricanes this year. You're going to have Notre Dame in there, Florida, Louisville. They have to go at SMU as well. There's no Clemson on here because they didn't want a complete and total murderer's row of a football schedule. But boy, as far as the ACC is concerned, I don't know if you can make it that much tougher when you factor in that they've got Notre Dame and Florida in the non-conference. Their win total on FanDuel, Kenton, is 8.5, and there is a reason for that. Last year it was 10.5, I believe. It was 9.5 or 10.5, and I don't think that they're looking at the Hurricanes saying, they won't be one of the best teams in the ACC, or they won't have a good roster, or Carson Beck isn't any good. I think they're looking at this schedule and going, that's just ridiculously brutal. And it's not a good move for the ACC because it makes it harder to get 2 teams into the playoff. Can they do that, though? We will answer that question. First, a reminder, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities between the Chiefs and the Eagles. And you can bet on it all. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, betting on the coin toss is available for you sickos out there. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Plus, the amount of information that you can get, even if you don't want to place a bet, which is very much available, about college football right now is plentiful over on FanDuel. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Can the ACC pull a rabbit out of the hat again? That's what it took to get 2 teams into the playoff last year, and that's kind of what it'll take to get 2 teams into the playoff next year. Kenton Gibbs of Locked On ACC still joining me here on the show, because what you essentially need when you are the Big 12 or ACC to get 2 teams in, you need an 11-1 team that loses a conference championship, and that's basically it. The other team's record can be anything, but you need an 11-plus win team in your conference championship game to lose. And Clemson, at 10-3, if they weren't a conference champion, would not have gotten in. 10-2, ACC, Miami didn't even get half of a look. They and BYU were completely disregarded while we debated the merits of 9-3 Alabama, 9-3 Ole Miss, and 9-3 South Carolina. They weren't in the running. I don't think that's changing all of a sudden from one year to the next in college football. And when I look at these schedules, Kenton, Louisville's schedule is brutal down the stretch. They have to play all three of Clemson, SMU, and Miami. 2 of those games, by the way, are on the road. We talked about Miami's schedule being brutal. Clemson opens with LSU. I mean, that game alone could decide whether the ACC gets 2 teams in. I think this is going to be an even bigger struggle next year.
I could see it, but I disagree. And let me tell you why I disagree. I'm looking at this thing like this. Clemson, I think that's a foregone conclusion. I think they're going to whoop the wheels off LSU. I don't trust Brian Kelly. I have
couple of veteran quarterbacks.
I've never trusted Brian Kelly. And every time I say I don't trust him, he proves me right. Every single time. Don't worry, Brian. I know you. I've always known you from back in your Central Michigan days. I know how this is going to end. Moving right along there. Clemson is poised to be very special this year. They are a team that their Achilles heel last year was their passing game. Well, last time I checked, Cade Klubnik ain't getting no younger or worse. Wesco ain't getting no younger or worse. Williams ain't getting no younger or worse. They are looking at a situation where most of their top pass catchers from last year coming back. Most of those guys are going to be expected to take a step forward. And Dabo, yes, that's right, Dabo Swinney jumped in the portal and got a pass catcher. Hold on, Trap. So with that being said, I expect Clemson to be special. I think they're a foregone conclusion to make it. Now, we already talked about how brutal Miami's schedule is. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. No way around that. You talked about Louisville's schedule also being a bit of a, murderous row in terms of ACC terms. I see it this way. Either them or SMU will get it done. And I'm telling you why. There are 2 things that always travel. A run game and a defense. And you know what I know Louisville's going to be bringing next year? A run game and the defense. That's going to be going with them everywhere they go. And if they have a quarterback that does not beat them, if they have a quarterback that's just a guy that they can win with, right? Nothing too special. They have one of the best freshman running back duos in the nation last year. 2 guys extremely young, getting it done at very high levels. And you're telling me that you're bringing those 2 back. You're bringing Isaac Brown and Duke Watson back, and I'm supposed to believe that those 2 and this team are somehow supposed to get worse? No. They've got some tough games on the road. I'm not saying they got an easy road. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is it's very possible. And I'll tell you what, when you look at the Brown brothers, they're quarterback whisperers for real. Mm-hmm. They don't just have that type. They took Jack Plummer. Jack Plummer looked stank, and stunk before he got to Louisville and made him look like he could run a respectable offense. So I think they'll be just fine. And I think that those are the 2 that the ACC gets into the playoff.
There are 2 games on Clemson's schedule against the SEC. They barely lost.
The big SEC lobby trying to silence you. That's what it is. Don't worry. We do the knowledge on Locked On College Football. You say, Spencer. I got you.
They open with LSU on August 30th. They close at South Carolina. I mean, yikes, Kenton. You have to split minimum in those games, as we discussed, because if you have 2 losses, even if LSU goes 9-3 and South Carolina goes 10-2, I don't think Clemson in the ACC will get the respect, even if they win all 10 of their other games, that they would probably deserve at that point in time, because there is this perception, whether you like it or not. I think there's some, but not all validity to it, that playing in the Big 12 or the ACC, it is a lot easier than playing in the Big 10 or the SEC. And frankly, after bowl season, Kenton, the perception of the ACC is incredibly weak. After having a solid year where they get two teams in the playoff, but they get blown, or not, well, SMU gets blown out, Clemson just loses. Those things were kind of supposed to happen, but with all that transpiring, Clemson cannot avoid a loss to one of those SEC teams and still find their way as an at-large bid to the college football playoff. Because as we said, it's probably got to be 11-1, and that's a high threshold, and SMU did it this past year, but SMU's schedule is significantly tougher next year, and Clemson's schedule isn't easy, and Louisville, and you just keep going down the list, and the ACC is playing Notre Dame as often as they can. Guess what? Notre Dame's going to have a new starting quarterback, but they're going to be good. They're going to be really good, and they're going to hand the ACC some tough losses.
I find it so interesting that we bring up the playoffs when it comes to the ACC and never when it comes to the SEC. Why not? What was the SEC's combined record in the playoff last year? Was it 1-3?
Okay. That's a separate discussion about.
We're talking about. I think that it's not necessarily fair to the ACC that we get held to our worst moments. Anytime the ACC looks bad, oh boy, the ACC had a tough bowl season. They stink now. But when the SEC had a horrible bowl season a couple of years ago, it was, well, all of their players are opting out.
The SEC just had a terrible bowl season, by the way.
That's my point.
Right. They just had a terrible bowl season. What I'm saying is that the way the deciding parties in college football are looking at the conference is through this particular lens. That doesn't mean I believe it should be that way, because there were people saying 9-3 Alabama should have gotten into the playoff over 11-2 SMU. I said, you are either high or having a stroke, and I don't want to live in a world where that is the case, where we have just nullified the importance of a great season. And lo and behold, the committee did get that right. I still worry in the back of my mind, though, Kenton, that, a 10-3 ACC would probably get overlooked. Like if you go 10-2 in the regular season, make the conference championship game, lose 10-3, I think you're going to get overlooked for a 9-3.
And here's the thing. I'm not disagreeing with you necessarily, and I don't think that that's your sentiment, Spencer. I know you. Okay. You know ball. We're good there. I want the fans to know that we're not playing those games. I've read the comments. I've heard people talk about your show. I love your show, Spencer, but I know a lot of people think you're pro SEC. And I'm going to tell you right now, as long as I'm on this show, we peeling back the layers of that propaganda. Don't tell me about how many of the last 20 championships. Is Cam Newton walking through that damn door? No, he's a podcaster now. Okay? So this is not, don't tell me about what him and Nick Fairley and Philip Lustigkirk, and God rest his soul, he's a wonderful player, even better man by all accounts, did. They're not coming back. So what I'm saying is, again, you and me agree on this, but everybody doesn't. I don't want to hear about the past. I don't want to hear about, the ACC had a bad bowl season. If the SEC did as well, but for them it's, players opt now, da-da-da. Now, with that, back to your original point here, if we talk about, hey, the schedules are tough, what happens and how does the ACC get 2 in? I 1,000% agree with you that it is most likely going to be that case, that you need an 11 win and a conference champion. Should it be the case? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We have seen firsthand what these teams look like when they're put up to the test of scrutiny. We have seen firsthand, that LSU team, you can't, they're them boys in the bayou. They're going to sling it around. They're going to be great. USC beat them. What are we doing here? Bama, they might, Granny, I know you're going to be watching this. I'm sorry in advance, Granny. Bama stunk against teams that they had 21-point spread, 14-point spread, I believe it was 18-point spreads against. All spreads of double digits, comfortably, lost all of them, could barely score against Oklahoma. Congratulations, if you're watching this show right now, between you, me, and Spencer, there are as many people as there were points Alabama scored in that game. So don't tell me about what, all that is. The ACC should not have to go that well and have a team go undefeated or a conference champion of 12 wins and an 11-win team to get 2 in. But that's just the nature of the beast. and that's what it's going to end up being. So you and I both agree that's what they're going to need, even though they shouldn't. That's my argument. They shouldn't need that, even though they will.
Never have to ask Kenton Gibbs to bring the heat. He just brings it and brings it. And by the way, thanks for bringing up my past Oregon trauma with Lutzenkirchen and Cam Newton and Nick Fairley. That was such a welcome surprise on the segment on today's show. I love reliving that game. I've never thought about it before since then. It was 14 years ago. I'm not over it yet. Kenton Gibbs, Locked On ACC, great as always. Are the Big 12 title odds great, confusing, strange? I kind of like them. First, this episode brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting, wondering, and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. TurboTax.com. Tell me, at the beginning of the 2024 season, did you put Arizona State, future preseason Big 12 conference favorite, onto your bingo card and put a stamp on it, or whatever you put onto a bingo card? I don't know. I'm not that old yet. But I love this for Arizona State, because whether or not they live up to that billing, Tempe has been starved for a team like this, for a coach like Kenny Dillingham that wants to make it work there, that understands what it means to be a Sun Devil and what that place can be. This has long been described as the sleeping giant of the Pac-12, RIP, and going into the Big 12, it was, oh boy, they're in a messy spot, back-to-back 3-9 seasons. Then they shocked the world. They have, according to FanDuel, the best national championship odds of any Big 12 team, and they are tied with Kansas State for the best conference championship odds. Now, Kansas State being there, that's a sneaky team, because they were rising before the season last year, and they had the spotlight, and they had the attention, and then they went to BYU, and there was a crazy game, and they got blown out, and it spiraled out of control. And you thought they would bounce back. They picked up a nice road win against Colorado, and then they kept going. And then it just didn't work out. And they lost to that Arizona State team on their home field in Manhattan, by the way. So I love that Arizona State is in that position, because they are deserving of that sort of recognition. And the fans deserve, down there at Arizona State, to have this sort of expectation. And they're also completely worthy of having such an expectation, because Arizona State is losing Cam Skattebo. That's not great. He was, as we saw in the playoff quarterfinal against Texas, a big part of what they did offensively. But you are bringing in an accomplished running back in Kanye Udo from Army to be a tailback. He's not going to be a do-it-all like Cam Skattebo was. Nobody is what Cameron Skattebo was for Arizona State's offense last year. But you're getting another year of Sam Leavitt. His best wide receiver, Jordan Tyson, is returning. They have hit the transfer portal in a couple of other key spots with guys who you go, wait, that's like a power four starting caliber player, not someone they're trying to elevate from or give an opportunity to that no one else was willing to get. They're not going after those sorts of guys. So I love what Arizona State is doing. I love that they're getting that level of respect and attention, because they deserve it. They deserve it, not just because of the season they had, because of what their fans have gone through, but because of the way that they're backing it up in the offseason. That is a really important point to put here. So would I have Arizona State as my favorite in the Big 12 if I were making Spencer Sportsbook? Yeah, I probably would. Now, third in the odds, tied for third with Baylor, getting to them in just a moment, is BYU. So BYU, again, fascinating football team, because BYU fans will readily tell you throughout the course of last season, I did not believe in them for a very long time. Eventually, that lack of belief played itself out, but it went on far longer than I could have justified keeping that particular take. So I had to retire it. We had a nice ongoing joke weekly where I'd pick against BYU, even though I thought they were going to win. But they won their first 9 games and then lost 2 of their last 3. Missed the playoff, never got any real consideration there. But BYU brings back a lot of guys. A lot of guys. Couple wide receivers, their quarterback Jake Retzlaff, Harrison Taggart on defense. Like they're bringing back a core that makes me think their floor is pretty high. I just don't know what their ceiling is. I don't quite know. But when you go through the Big 12 and say, well, then Spencer, who would you put as third in the Big 12 championship odds? Because I do like Kansas State. I would have Arizona State slightly above them. They have the same odds at plus 550, according to FanDuel. I would have Kansas State slightly below at plus 600 and Arizona State at plus 550, if that's the appropriate number for the favorite in the Big 12, which is once again going to be among the most open, maybe the most open and competitive conference championship races in the country, because the favorite in the ACC, Clemson, plus 270. In the Big 10, Ohio State, plus 155. Texas in the SEC, plus 210. Do you realize the size of that gap between your number one favorite? Oh, gosh, it's just such a fun conference to be able to follow along with. But BYU, I really, really like. I don't know if I love, at least not yet. We'll see how I feel after spring football. But Baylor in there at plus 700. It feels like an overreaction. I know Baylor had a really strong end of the year, and there's a lot of momentum, and Sawyer Robertson's back at quarterback. That's all great. That's all great. I don't know, man. There was so much bad, wrong, not good, bad feeling going into last year that they were able to pull it out, and by the way, should have won one extra game, except they allowed a Hail Mary, almost 2, against Colorado on the road. If they don't give up a Hail Mary, then they have another win, and it feels even better. So I get them being there, but here's where the Big 12 gets really fun. If you have a question about a team and they're being they're too high, they're getting too much respect, they shouldn't be there in the odds, the way I feel about Baylor, I have to go, well, who am I replacing them with? Who am I going to look at in the rest of this just beautiful conference for a conference championship race and go, yeah, I'm going with them? Arizona's dead last, by the way. I'm just going to let that sit out there because I don't think you would have said that before last season either. But those 2 programs, Arizona State and Arizona, they have completely flipped from the top and bottom positions in the Big 12 relative to the rest of the conference. And the one team I do think is really underrated here is Texas Tech. They're behind Kansas in the odds at plus 950, and Kansas is plus 750. Now, I'm optimistic that Lance Leipold can have a bounce-back season with the Jayhawks after a tremendously disappointing and personally hurtful letdown of a season. But hey, it happens. I forgive. I just don't forget. Texas Tech, though, has one of the highest-rated transfer portal classes in the entire country. It has been consistently top 5. They recently got bumped out of the top spot, but they are going aggressively in the transfer portal. They have got Baron Morton back at quarterback. Joey McGuire's got another year under his belt. They're making a change at defensive coordinator. That was plainly obvious that it needed to happen, and well, lo and behold, it did. Not everybody does that, by the way. Not everybody does that. I like giving teams and coaches credit for attacking mistakes and not waiting around. Blake Baker hired at LSU last year, Danton Lynn at USC. Why? Because those coaches finally realized, yeah, this is not good enough. This is a problem. It's not up to our standard. Did they wait too long? Maybe. But at least they got around to it. And Texas Tech, if they could play just a little bit better on defense. Remember, Abilene Christian almost went in there and beat them in overtime. It came down to a 2-point play. That's an FCS team. That should never happen. But I don't worry about Texas Tech's offense. I worry about Texas Tech's defense. That might be why they're so low. But the haul they have brought in the transfer portal, which includes some impact guys, that is not to be overlooked. So that's a team that I think is a little bit low. Iowa State's right behind them at plus 1,000. This conference at Colorado, for those curious, is at plus 1,600 behind both those teams and tied with TCU. You talk about sneaky underrated teams in the Big 12 Conference. TCU is up there. And I said all year about TCU. they're a waste of a good offense. Because they were. They were a really good offense. Josh Hoover had one of the best quarterback seasons in arguably the best quarterback conference in all of college football this past year, the Big 12. It was either them or the SEC. It was certainly not the Big 10 or the ACC or any G5 league, that's for sure. Those two were a step above the rest, and Josh Hoover was just really good. But their defense wasn't very good. Like Texas Tech, waste of a really good offense. That's a theme in the Big 12 at times, at least historically it has been. But I think Texas Tech is slightly undervalued there. But the chaos that's going to ensue in this league, you just can't look away. It's not a car wreck you can't look away from. It's the Mona Lisa of college football conference championship races. You just look at it and go, I don't want to stop looking at it. And guess what? We never have to. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.